Good morning, everybody. May we get settled, please, so we can start. So if you'd like to take your seats, please come closer to the front if you'd like to, and then we'll get started. Thanks. So perhaps before we start, let me introduce Professor Rosinho, who has been the convener of a number of sessions related to North-South cooperation. We'll just say a few words and then we'll start our session. Prof?
Yeah, thank you. So I just want to encourage you, please, to stay and to listen to this, and please to look at the three ones as part of one single vision, which is, the rationale behind this was, let's look at what happened in the area of North-South collaboration, cooperation, and how this can be improved, add new models, and that's what Ms. Shaba is the chair and convener of this session. It will be followed by another session where we are going to analyze the decolonization of African pharmaceutical manufacturing industry and product development in general industry, which will take place after this one, where I also will be a speaker. And the third one will be about the proposal of the creation of a African product development partnership, which would be African-led and will correspond to an African agenda and driven by African themselves. So it is really in this perspective that I would like to invite you to follow the three sessions, and I would like to thank again Ms. Shabat for the effort she put into organizing this session so well. Thank you very much, and I hope you will stay with us until the end.
Thank you very much, Prof. So our session can now begin. My name is Mampe Chaba, Chief Director, Multilateral Cooperation in Africa, Department of Science and Innovation. So my role within the department is to support strategic engagements within the continent. We currently have about 26 S&T agreements in Africa, and we also engage with a number of multilateral organizations, I think about 12 or so in total, including the OECD, the UN organizations, and some of the South-South partnerships. I'm also responsible for supporting our Africa multilateral partnerships, so the work that we do within SADC, within the African Union, and also strategic partnerships with the EU as a bloc. So we do a lot of partnerships, STI-related partnerships, and in the process we've learned a lot of lessons, but we also think that to address the continental challenges, we need to look at new approaches in partnerships, new models of partnerships that will ensure benefit for both funders and beneficiaries. The UN recognized that to attain sustainable development, SDG 17, which speaks to means of implementation, and in particular referring to global partnerships, was very critical. The UN indicates that successful developmental agenda requires inclusive partnerships at global, regional, national, and local levels that require public-private partnerships, that require that they build upon principles and values, upon shared visions and shared goals, placing people and the planet at the center. This need for partnerships was made more evident during the 2019 COVID pandemic, where global response was required. The session today will emphasize and draw new models of partnership, which are not necessarily based on funding, but are based on what each partner brings to the table, whether this is through tangible or intangible contributions. Those have to be recognized. We have a packed session. We have 5 panelists, 4 of which will be online, and one who is here with me will also share her experience and expertise on this topic. So to start us off, we've invited Professor Paulo Esteves, who is researcher based in Brazil, and he'll talk to us a little bit about effective triangular cooperation, in particular the guidelines that look at effective triangular cooperation and what those mean in addressing new forms of partnership. So perhaps without further ado, let me ask Paolo to share with us within 8 minutes or less these guidelines, but most importantly to help us draw the line between triangular, regional and multi-stakeholder partnerships, and to also address the difference that can be made through triangular cooperation vis-a-vis bilateral cooperation when it comes to North-South partnerships. Paolo, are you there? Thank you, Paolo. Please go ahead. You've got 8 minutes.
Very much for the kind invitation. What I'm going to do today is to present you what triangular cooperation, I'm going to try to present you what triangular cooperation is, the guidelines adopted for triangular cooperation, and I'm going to work on a specific case study that we conducted on the SAIS2 project. If I may share my screen with you, let me see here. Oh my God, where is it? Just a sec. It's not this. Just a second, please. Okay, let me try it again. Okay, let's try this. Sorry about that. Okay, there we go. Can you see my full screen?
Yes, we can.
Perfect. So, as I said, what I'm going to do is try to present you the voluntary guidelines for triangular cooperation. These guidelines were established by the Global Partnership for Effective Development Cooperation, which is a multi-stakeholder platform gathering different kind of partners, government providers, government recipients, and hybrid countries like South Africa, which at the same time receive ODA from northern countries, but also act as development cooperation providers. This platform also includes civil society organizations and private sector in its own governance arrangements. The study that I'm going to present was funded by the Global Affairs Canada. And I have to say, I'm not speaking neither on behalf of the GPDC, the Global Partnership for Effective Development Cooperation, nor on behalf of the Global Affairs Canada. Triangular cooperation also involves, as the name say, 3 or more partners, which play different roles in this partnership. Very often, it's a northern country, it's a developed country, which very often fund a specific project. A southern country which will share some policy or experience with other partner recipient countries and the recipients themselves. So we have this triangular with these 3 sides very defined, which are the facilitator country, the country which in general funds the project, the pivotal country, which in general implement the project, and the recipient countries. These guidelines were established in 2018, trying to boost the effectiveness of triangular cooperation. There are 8 guidelines. First, country ownership and demand-driven cooperation shared commitments, focus on results-oriented approaches and solutions, inclusive partnerships and multi-stakeholder dialogues, transparency and mutual accountability, innovation and co-creation, joint learning and knowledge sharing for sustainable development, advanced gender equality and the empowerment of women and girls, and leaving no one behind, which is an approach adopted by the 2030 Agenda. What I'm going to share with you today is a study that were built around two main questions. To what extent do partners engage in triangular cooperation, adopting the voluntary guidelines at both the operational and the policy levels? And what practices enable, in fact, the adoption of the voluntary guidelines? I'm going to concentrate my presentation in the second question about the practices that enable the adoption of the voluntary guidelines. And I'm going to do that through the case study of SAIS2 project, which was a project. SAIS2 is the acronym to designate Southern Africa Innovation Support Program, which was in phase 2, started in 2017 and ended in 2022 because of the pandemic. The date for the end date was originally 2021, but because of the pandemic, it was postponed to the beginning of 2022. The goal of the project was to support the growth of new businesses through strengthening innovation ecosystems and the promotion of cross-border collaboration between innovation role players in the region of Southern Africa. The facilitator country was actually Finland. Finland funded and managed the project together with recipient countries, Botswana, Namibia, South Africa, Tanzania, Zambia, and the SADC itself. The particularity of this project is that the pivotal country, which is the country that implements the project, actually changes according to the dynamic of the project itself. We're gonna discuss that in a little bit. I have to rush here. Our main findings regarding whether or not the project was aligned with this with the voluntary guidelines found very good results. The project was completely aligned with the voluntary guidelines, even though the voluntary guidelines and the project were launched at the same time. So when the project was designed, the participants did not have knowledge about the guidelines because the guidelines did not exist themselves. But nevertheless, if we compare what has happened in the project and how the project was implemented and designed and implemented, we are going to see that they are completely consistent with the guidelines. What we have learned with that, and what practices that enable the adoption of the voluntary guidelines. We work in 4 dimensions here. First one is triangulation, how the partnership itself was built. Second one is governance, how the project was managed. The third one is implementation, and finally, what practices would enable or would boost effectiveness of the project. The first one is triangulation. The big innovation of SAIS2 is particularly the fact that we don't have a specific pivotal country. The SAIS2, if I interpret a project that Nampei knows much better than I do, the singularity of SAIS2 is precisely the fact that every country has something to bring to the table. Every country has something to learn. Every country has some knowledge to share, has some experience to share. So every country can play the role of the same time as beneficiary and as a pivotal country. This dynamic allowed what we are calling dynamic triangulation. So you don't have fixed positions here. The triangle assumes different forms depending on the specific activity that is being implemented. Second, on governance. The other innovation of this project is the fact that the project brings to its own management system At the same time, line ministries or high-level authorities and implementing agencies, particularly in the innovation sector in evolving countries. So this shared coordination, that shared and multi-level coordination enhances, from one side, ownership, the capacity of the actors to actually own the project in terms of its design and implementation, and also transparency, because everybody knows what the other actors are doing during the project. Third, and probably this is the juicy part of our research, SAIS2 adopt a kind of a multi-sectoral consortia. So it's a transversal consortia bringing together many dimensions, many sectors of activity of a given government, but also civil society and businesses that play their roles, that play different roles in different sectors. There are mirroring teams. So if we think about innovation agencies, in the partner countries, all these teams mirror themselves. There is a competency framework that was established by the partners. A special purpose funds which were created to boost specific activities. One of them, for instance, to boost or to strengthen the regional capacity to work on innovation on food security, for instance, and the creation of a community of practices, gathering together the innovation agencies in the region, sharing their own experiences through time. I'm completely out of time here. This is the last question I wanna bring to the table. It's three kinds of practices that SAIS2 adopted. First, gender mainstreaming. Since the beginning, SAIS2 adopted a human rights-based approach and gender mainstreaming strategy since its own inception, which is a very important innovation that brings women and girls to the front of the project, the concern about empowering women and girls to the front of the project. Second, an intercultural approach that enables all the partners to share their own backgrounds. And third, targeting vulnerable groups through activities like breaking barriers for female technology entrepreneurship in the region of Southern Africa, or strengthen inclusive innovation training programs, which was another activity that, in a way, target vulnerable groups. I'm going to leave there. Mampei, sorry for taking 2 minutes and a half more than I should. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you very much, Prof. I think that was insightful. Prof, I think if you can share the link of the guidelines, that would be great, so that people that
Sure.
are interested in the voluntary guidelines can have a look and apply the guidelines as they enter into various partnerships. Of importance in what you raised is the issues of intercultural approaches, issues of gender, issues of looking at vulnerable groups. Often when we enter into partnerships, we ignore these important factors. So when you engage in partnerships, we have to be careful that we take those into account. Please be on standby, Prof. We'll take questions later from the audience. But for now, I'd like to bring in our SADC representative, a good friend of ours as well, Ms. Annelien Morgan. If she is connected, she's the Senior Program Officer, Science, Technology and Innovation within the SADC Secretariat. And Annelien, within your area of work, you represent a vast number of countries, 16 countries within the SADC region at different levels of development, different needs. How do you ensure that as you engage on their behalf, make sure that their needs are met? How does Africa, and in particular the SADC region, engage with counterparts in partnerships, whether it be EU, GIZ, or the British Council and the like? How do you ensure that while you maintain the respective countries' interests, you also ensure that they co-own the partnership and they remain active and their mutual benefit is catered for. And yeah, perhaps let's address that for now. We will come back to you later on as well. Are you there, Annelien?
Yes, thank you, Ms. Moderator. Thank you, Mampe, for the invitation to participate in this very important conference. Unfortunately, I couldn't come to Durban as I've done in previous years. Yeah. But maybe say thank you to my fellow panelists and thank you to the presentation from Prof. We have contributed to that input in the triangular partnership when they were collecting their data. But just to say that in the context of a regional bloc such as SADC, because SADC is a regional economic community which represents 16 countries or governments, as you have rightly articulated. And these 16 governments develop common agendas. And one of that common agenda is articulated through our treaty firstmost, which is the SADC Treaty. And the main common agenda is really to facilitate regional integration amongst the 16 governments. And through this, we have articulated a number of programs, and those programs are articulated in 4 priority areas. One is on industrial development and market integration. The second priority area is on infrastructure development for regional integration. The third is on peace and security, a very key foundation component, because we can't facilitate regional integration in a region where there's conflict. So we've got peace and security as a key foundation of those priorities. And then we've got the 4th priority, which is multi-sectorial, cross-sectorial programs focusing on regional integration. And one of those, for example, is around industrial development, where we are implementing a number of programs. So for example, under industrial development, we've identified with the member states what are the key priorities for us to industrialize as a region. And we followed what we call a value chain approach. So we've identified a number of key priority value chains in the region, such as pharmaceuticals, agro-processing, mining, capital goods, services, etc. So for example, if I take the agro-processing value chain, so we are working with member states where we've mapped out the value chain itself. And out of mapping out the value chain, we've identified key interventions or programs. So one of those programs, we are currently implementing a program that started in 2019 called Support to Industrial Sectors. And that program is focusing on developing 2 value chains. One in agro-processing, which is focused on leather, and in pharmaceuticals, we are focusing on ARV value chain. So the program started in 2019. It's a partnership between SADC Secretariat, the European Union, and the German government. And we've put some resources together. It's a 5-year program with quite a substantial amount of budget that has been allocated. And within that program, we are focusing on issues such as policy environment, the regulatory environment, both for government and for business within those value chains. We are also looking at issues of private sector participation. So what is the role of private sector, for example, in enhancing the value chain, the leather value chain, or the ARV value chain? We are also looking at the issues around pharmaceuticals and medical value chain. For example, with COVID, when COVID hit, we had to quickly reprioritize the focus of the project to also support COVID interventions. So we, under the project, we have grants that we are awarding. So we had grants focusing on COVID responses, where we awarded a number of grants to a number of countries. In total, we awarded 14 grants to 14 countries. And these were, the grantees were companies, actual companies and organizations. And then we had another grant that we awarded, a competitive grant under the program focusing on innovation. So what innovations can we support within the 2 value chains, which is leather and ARV? And I'm happy to say that we've successfully awarded the first project under the leather to a total value of about $500,000 for 18 months. And this is given to supporting your SMEs in tanneries, within the leather value chain, hides and skins, etc. So this is the value of partnerships, and those partnerships benefiting our member states, in particularly taking an approach in supporting industrialization. So I'd like to stop there. Thank you, Chair.
16 partner countries within the region benefit from the partnerships that you negotiate, ensuring that their interests, their needs are also met. So we'll hear from you later on, time permitting. But for now, let's move to Dr. Irene Anor Frampong, who is the LEAP for FNSSA coordinator. Among the many hats that she wears, LEAP for FNSSA stands for the Long-Term Europe-Africa Partnership for Food Nutrition, Security and Sustainable Agriculture, but she is also a lead researcher at the Forum for Agricultural Research in Africa, FARA. So Irene, thank you so much for joining us. Can you just share with us some of the issues that you deal with within the LEAP for FNSSA partnership, in particular when you talk about food security as an emerging priority for many African countries and many countries in general? How some of the developments within LEAP for FNSSA, such as the IRC, are envisaged to ensure evidence-based or evidence-informed advice for policymakers, particularly when it comes to agriculture between Africa and Europe, agricultural research between Africa and Europe. What are some of your experiences and food for thought that you can share with the partners here?
Yes, thank you very much, Madam Moderator. Thank you for the invitation. So I will focus on the partnership between Africa and Europe, given an example of the International Research Consortium. If I can probably put my slideshow. Yes, so we are specifically talking about just a bit of a policy context. This is just between the African Union and the European Union. And specifically, we're talking about specific technical bodies within the African Union and the departments of agriculture, rural economy and blue economies, Department of Education, Science and Technology, AUD, NEPAD, Africa Continental Free Trade Area, regional economic communities and member states on the Africa side. And on the European side, we're similarly talking about specific directorates on agriculture, international partnerships, research and innovation, country delegations and member states. So quickly to give a bit of background, Europe and Africa, I think we all know they have cooperated for decades. But starting early 2000, it was recognized that the relationship between Africa and Europe was more mutual than one of donor-recipient relationship. Specific efforts, therefore, during 2000 AU-EU summits were made, and in 2007, a joint Africa-Europe strategy was developed that was underpinned by a high-level policy dialogue with its Bureau of Member States. And this high-level policy dialogue actually articulated different priorities. The first one, which I talk about, is on the food, nutrition, security, and sustainable agriculture. In 2014, the roadmap of FNSSA was approved. And beyond that, there are other priorities that the HLPD have also approved on climate change and more recently on science, technology, and innovation. So the IRC example I gave is within the first priority of food, nutrition, and sustainable agriculture. Again, this relationship is predicated on different funding instruments that we know about, Horizon 2020, and now Horizon Europe.
Sorry, Irene, I think your slides are not moving. If you can move your slides, please.
It's not moving at all.
We're still on the title slide.
Then I have to go back. Sorry.
Perhaps you can, yeah, thanks.
Yeah.
You can also project it in presentation mode, perhaps?
Yes, I will reshare it. I think that's where the problem is. Do you see it now?
But we can see,
Can
we
you
are on
next
slide
slide?
2 now. Policy
Is that
context.
moving now?
You can go
Is it
ahead.
moving?
We are on slide 2.
Okay, but do you see something on the slide on policy context?
Yes.
Okay, super, then we're in. Okay, so I've been blabbing about all this relationship, but I think specifically I'm drawing attention to the cooperation between the African Union and European Commission. And I was making the point that the first priority that the high-level policy dialogue approved was on the food, nutrition, security, and sustainable agriculture. And that had 4 thematic areas on sustainable intensification, agriculture and food systems and nutrition, expansion and improvement of agriculture trade and markets, and other cross-cutting elements. So far, this partnership under the FNSSA brings together over 300 projects. And we have a database that actually is providing the knowledge about these projects and the lessons thereof. And one of such, which is facilitating the International Research Consortium, is the LEAP for FNSSA that you mentioned. And the important point to make is that this research consortium that is being proposed actually also links to other important bodies that coordinate research globally, like the CGIAR and the FAO. So I want to just focus on this roadmap, 3 key areas in terms of long-term actions about connecting researchers, funders, and policymakers and other actors, monitoring and evaluation, and linking to new priorities and policies in order to make it also very robust. So a number of new priorities are emerging, which the FNSSA works to link to bring them together. So the AU-EU International Research Consortium itself currently is being facilitated by a Horizon 2020 coordination support action under the LEAP for FNSSA. It ends this year in October. And what we're excited about is that the project has successfully worked on transitioning the AU-EU FNSSA partnership into a long-term sustainable platform that will improve implementation of the roadmap. And what is this platform? Is simply an alliance of stakeholders with long-term and sustainable governance, funding mechanisms, and a knowledge management communication system. A lot of it is around what Prof. Paulo just mentioned. So the International Research Consortium platform has 4 objectives of increasing synergies and coherence between actors, developing a learning environment, and establishing a long-term sustainable coordination infrastructure, and liaising, of course, with the policy structures, ensuring that science is always linking up with policy. These principles I will jump is similar to what Prof. Paulo had just mentioned. I think we are in alignment with all those 8 or so principles that were mentioned: inclusivity, responsibility, shared governance, flexibility, and co-creation. So for the IRC, the key strategies are focusing on dealing with diversity, ensuring that different stakeholders are on the same page and on equal footing in terms of commitment, dealing with private sector, so ensuring we're including business and a demand-driven approach, and also ensuring co-financing or co-funding, and dealing with different regions and clusters as well as different networks. So what strategies are being adopted is by creating the commitment at institutional level, not even just country. Adding Africa and Europe private sector to our food, nutrition, security, and sustainable agriculture initiatives, showcasing alignment with other big blocks, as I said, with CGIAR, with FARA, with AgriNatura, and others, and also showing relevant services that the International Research Consortium and its potential members can provide in terms of information on projects and policies. As I said, we have a large database, sharing knowledge and networks across regions, finding partners, and providing value for money services at low cost. But it's also important we recognize that we need to develop and proclaim a strong vision, continuously show results with impact on the ground. Important to guarantee long-term funding from both continents, including public and private sector. Developing a fair governance, I can't overemphasize that. Prioritizing a just representation of women and youth, and discussing and adapting priorities even where needed. Building ownership through membership contribution. So in terms of the vision, we are seeing that it's about Africa and Europe collectively achieving national, regional, and global targets through accelerated implementation of the high-level policy dialogue, and of course, at implementing its roadmap. A key element for the IRC is ensuring that as a network of networks working across Europe and Africa, involving member states, that there is equity and common priority agendas that can scale up and give the impact we're looking for. We're therefore ensuring that members or all institutions that are members of the IRC then will have better use and higher impact for their research and projects, and also that they will have a higher efficacy of projects across with access to a large knowledge and database, and also have a structural interaction between the partners in a participatory way, as mentioned earlier, in terms of contribution of all kinds, in joint funding, but also in kind, and that there's a serious two-way communication between the EU and the EU and science policy interface, which has eluded us for many, many years. So as a last slide, let me mention that we are working towards launching this International Research Consortium platform. We've reached out broadly to over 2,500 institutions, stimulating interest and participation. So far, we have over 300 entities expressing interest from 34 African countries and 16 European countries, and co-designing and the IRC governance mechanism. I will show you the link for the zero draft where we have clearly articulated the governance structure. And currently we are encouraging institutions to officially express their potential interest to be part of the IRC. This is all being, of course, facilitated by the NIFO-FNSSA project itself, being 35 institutions across 22 countries in Africa and Europe. The final Rise, Shop and Founding launch will be in Accra, 14th to 16th September, and hoping that as part of the principles of the IRC, all the members then will form part of defining the structure and key elements of the International Research Consortium. Currently, we have a zero draft that has emerged from all the engagements, over 2,000 engagements we have had on our website, and we encourage you to take a look and contribute to this. Even today, after this meeting, we have an e-consultation ongoing that is going to focus on funding and sustainability of the IRC. So we're using this platform to encourage as many as possible to also be part of this, and also to join this International Research Consortium. Thank you, Madam Moderator, for the time. I'm grateful.
Thank you very much, Irene, for sharing the IRC model with us. We didn't get to see all of your slides, so if you can please share your slides with our coordinator, Tato, and then we can disseminate to the participants. But I think as participants listen in, I'd like you to think about how you're being consulted when the likes of SADC of AU negotiate funding instruments, and what kind of concerns or issues would you like them to address as they negotiate this funding instrument? So please think about that. Irene, in your presentation, you spoke about having consulted 205 institutions across 34 countries, which is commendable. A lot of the multilateral bodies that represent our interests don't go to those lengths to consult researchers and beneficiaries on the ground. So having said that, I'd like to bring in the World Bank, Mr. Ganesh Rasagama, who has been our partner in a number of activities that we've taken and has done very well in working with the private sector. So if you can share with us, Ganesh, if you connected, how the private sector can better be integrated in STI cooperation instruments, basing this on the good work that you've done with the private sector of late. Are you connected, Ganesh?
Thank you, moderator. Can you hear me?
Loud and clear.
Thank you. I'm going to share my screen. Just give me a couple of minutes.
We can see your presentation. If you can just put it in presentation mode.
Okay, that's good. Let me try and do that.
If you can go to the bottom of your screen.
Yeah, is it better now? Can you see it?
Yes.
Okay, great. So, so thank you for this invitation to present at the Bio-Africa Convention session on partnerships. And I wanted to share something that we are working very closely with the South African government on, which is the Innovation Bridge portal, which is led by the Department of Science and Innovation through the CSIR in partnership with the Department of Small Business Development and other stakeholders in South Africa. I'm Ganesh. I'm based in Pretoria for the World Bank, covering the 5 SACU countries for finance, competitiveness, and innovation. So the Innovation Bridge portal, what is it? So it's a digital platform that the Department of Science and Innovation and CSIR have invested in, and the idea is to establish a community for innovation and entrepreneurship, initially across the 5 SACU countries. And the objectives of this platform are: one is to strengthen collaboration and networking amongst the ecosystems of the 5 countries. And as you know, South Africa is clearly a leader in the ecosystem of these 5 countries. There's a lot that South Africa can offer to the other 4 smaller ecosystems, and how can we strengthen collaboration amongst the ecosystem actors of these 5 countries in the space of innovation and entrepreneurship. And then what will that collaboration entail would be a sharing of knowledge, experiences, learning across the 5 countries, and then providing opportunities for entrepreneurs and innovators in the other 4 countries to benefit from what's available in South Africa in terms of services, coaching, mentoring, training, and of course, access to finance markets and across the 5 countries for entrepreneurs. And what is the important feature of this platform is that it's data-driven, evidence-driven. So continuous monitoring and evaluation and impact valuation is a key part of what we're trying to do. So this is not a new platform. It was established in 2017 by the DSI. But in the last year or so, we've been working closely as the World Bank Group with the DSI and CSIR to look at how we can revamp the platform. And this was launched in May 2022 as a new upgraded platform, which has benefited from, firstly, experience of other platforms globally who are doing similar things in different parts of the world, in East Asia, in other parts of Africa. And secondly, to bring in more private sector participation and private sector engagement into this platform. And so if you go, you can go online and look at it. It's innovationbridge.info. And we wanted to also work towards making this South African government platform for all activities pertaining to innovation and entrepreneurship. So what have we done in the last couple of years is to, again, working with the partners in government and the private sector, we have, the first thing, of course, is to make sure that the platform responds to the needs of the private sector, the entrepreneurs and the innovators out there. So the upgrade is important in terms of being user-friendly and up-to-date information and so on. We've run a series of innovation challenges, corporate innovation challenge with some of the biggest corporates in South Africa in partnership with a global service provider, one of the best in the space for corporate innovation challenges. We've done an Agritech challenge. The idea being to build communities of practice on this platform for different sectors, for Agritech, for FinTech, biotech, and so on. We have partnered with a South African private ecosystem actor to provide what is known as Thinkubate, which is an incubator accelerator program as a platform, a hybrid platform for digital and face-to-face mentoring and coaching. And this is being rolled out to support entrepreneurs across these 5 countries. And as I mentioned, the revamped portal was launched in May, and we now have more than 1,000 ecosystem actors who are on the platform, and a huge number of entrepreneurs who are now engaging through the platform. And where are we going with this? In the next 2 years, I think we have to demonstrate the value of this platform, which means that it has to be integrated across government platforms. And there's active conversations going on how to integrate the DSI and DSBD SMME platforms. We want to make this platform accessible to the underserved entrepreneurs in the ecosystem, the township entrepreneurs, the rural entrepreneurs. And so there's a program that is being designed together with ecosystem actors in the private sector to see how we can reach these entrepreneurs in townships and create new businesses in townships, focusing on green businesses, on fintech, inclusive financial solutions, and constantly looking at opportunities for new partnerships and collaboration. I think the government of South Africa has a vision to go beyond these 5 countries now. We would love to see how we can partner with SADC to make this a SADC-wide initiative to collaborate with other ecosystem actors in different parts of Africa. And as I said, I think the value of doing this has to be demonstrated through evidence, through data and impact evaluation. And that's something that is being actively pursued. So let me just stop here and share this example of what we hope will be a good model of private-public collaboration. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ganesh. I'd like to encourage any entrepreneur, innovator in the room to go to the link, the Innovation Bridge portal, if you'd like to have partnerships that have an impact in partnership with the corporate sector. It might be worth your while to visit that website and see how you can participate in the various platforms. Of late, we had 12 corporates in South Africa that formed part of the partnership between DSI and the World Bank in supporting entrepreneurs and innovation, as indicated in Ganesh's slide. So please visit that website. Then last but not least, we have Meekness Lunga, program manager from the responsible for science and higher education at the British Council. And Madam, we've shared a platform before where you talk about new partnership models, and I thought that was particularly interesting. Can you share with us today how we can create equitable partnerships from the British Council's perspective? How are you planning to do that? How have you done that? and what can we learn from you? Thanks.
Thank you so much, Ms. Chaba, and thank you for the invitation for the British Council to participate in this discussion. I think a lot has been said already by my fellow panelists, so I will just provide my own take from a British Council perspective on the topic as already articulated. So I'm representing the British Council, which is the UK's international organization for cultural relations and educational opportunities. I'm mentioning this because cultural relations is about people-to-people relationships and connections. And by virtue of that, embedding the principles of equality, diversity, and inclusion in the work that we do is critical to us as an organization. We have 3 business cases that guide us and underpin the work that we do from an EDI framework. One is the moral perspective, where we perceive that investing in and being committed to equality, diversity, and inclusion is the right thing to do. It has a strong alignment to the principles of human rights and social justice. Secondly, from a legal perspective, we do know that there is always a legal case that recognizes the important role that the law plays in eradicating unjustified and unlawful discrimination and achieving positive change and inclusion within partnerships as well. And lastly, from a business perspective, as a cultural relations organization, mainstreaming EDI principles and practices is important for us in the work that we do as an organization. So I just wanted to start off by outlining that and to say that this conversation is a very important one and quite relevant to the work that we do at the Council. I'll draw on the findings and recommendations from a study that we recently conducted in partnership with the Association for Commonwealth Universities. It looked at the role of international partnerships in supporting the SDGs, as well as tackling issues of mutual benefits and equity within Global North and Global South partnerships. So I'll start by saying that institutional partnerships are quite effective, a very effective mechanism for driving scientific and educational cooperation. But we cannot ignore the level of imbalance and inequalities that exist within the traditional models of partnerships. I think one of the panelists spoke about the donor-recipient model. So as an organization, we have been committed to moving away from that kind of model. By the way, because of the limited time in this session, I will not be outlining all the different programs that we support, but we have a number of different programs around science innovation, technology, entrepreneurship as well. And it's all about partnerships between the UK and South Africa. And more recently, in 2021, we launched what we call the Innovation for African Universities program, which is a platform that facilitates partnerships not just between the UK and South Africa, but between the UK and Sub-Saharan Africa. So it's not just the UK SA model, but it's multilateral partnerships, which have also included industry partners as well, and what we call entrepreneurship ecosystem players. So more about that in the future. But for this session, I think against this backdrop of imbalances and inequalities that exist in partnerships, there is scope for rethinking the design and structure of international partnerships to ensure that they promote fair and mutually beneficial cooperation. So how do we mitigate unfairness in research and development collaborations? I will speak about just 4 of the practical approaches. There's more, but I'll just highlight 4 of some of the practical approaches that we have sort of embraced as an organization for tackling power imbalances and inequalities in international partnerships. So one is around funding and agenda setting. When we speak about equitable partnerships, these are intrinsically linked to the funding available and who administers the funds. So in designing partnerships, this is about moving away from the thinking that the person who has the funding is the person who sets the agenda. The person who brings the funding is the person who decides on what happens and on what the roles and responsibilities within the partnerships are. So regardless of where the funding comes from, Global North, Global South partnerships should be based on the shared priorities, interests, and inputs from all partners. There is a growing emphasis on the participatory partnership model, which is a model that's designed to drive equal participation and encourages local ownership of the projects. The second key practical consideration or factor is around the choice of partners. The first speaker spoke about, driving triangular cooperation alongside global north, global south, or south-south partnerships. So again, it's all about embracing multi-stakeholder relationships, where there is a balance, and it's about expanding the choice and types of partners involved in these bilateral or multilateral research and development partnership programs. So as I said earlier on, including industry players is one avenue for ensuring that there is diversity, because different partners will bring different contributions to the program, and they serve different purposes. And we ask for this to be demonstrated from the funding proposal stage. The third factor is around governance structures and procedures. I think this was articulated already by the speakers who have spoken before me, but it's really about ensuring that there's joint ownership in the governance and management of a partnership. So as an international partner, we see ourselves as a partner and not as a donor. We ask for this to be reflected from the proposal stage, and we also play a role in monitoring that during the implementation of the project, as well as assessing that through the M&E and the closure processes as well. So governance structures and procedures are very important. Lastly, it's about considering long-term support over short-term contracts. The research that we conducted showed that longer-term partnerships tend to be more equitable than those supported for shorter periods of time. Longer-term funding contracts allow time for mutual trust between the partners to fully develop, and for the outcomes to materialize, and for interventions to be sustained in the long term. So in conclusion, I'd like to just say that fair cooperation is not just important, but it's non-negotiable in international partnerships, and for the three reasons that I articulated when I started: the moral perspective, the legal perspective, as well as the business perspective. Thank you, Ms. Chaba.
Thank you very much, Ms. Lunga, for that presentation. I think now that you're here physically, I'd like to encourage participants to engage with you. After the session, you spoke a little bit about Innovation for African Universities program, and most of our participants are researchers from universities. So please do take advantage of that. We're out of time. Unfortunately, Prof. Rusingo, we need more time for these kinds of discussion. Next time, give us half a day so that we can engage fully. But I'd like to open the floor for one or two questions or comments. But I'd also like to give you an opportunity with our esteemed panelists here to tell them what it is that you'd like to see when they negotiate international funding instruments on your behalf. What is it that you'd like to see? What is your concern? But you can also feel free to pose a question to them. Anyone?
Mampei?
Yes?
It's Paulo. If I may, I have a problem here. I have to pick up my daughter at the daycare, and this is something that I cannot bend. So I have to apologize, but I have to leave now.
Not a
Sorry
problem.
about that.
Thank you so much, Paulo. We'll share the link to your guidelines with the participants as well. Thank you, and thanks for coming through.
Thank you. I have also shared my slides. If you
Yes.
wanna distribute, that would be great.
Thank you,
Thank you
Paulo.
very, very much.
Thank you, Prof. Bye.
Bye bye.
All right, I see no hands, so I'm assuming that the way SADC, FARA, the British Council, and others who are in the panel are negotiating instruments is to your satisfaction, and they will continue then in that light. But one hand from my left. Purposes.
Okay. Good day. Thank you, panelists, for your presentations around the partnership models that you have. My question is around the intellectual property. What approaches works best in such partnerships, because we mostly encounter challenges when we have a donor or a funder funding certain aspects of our R&D and owning the whole intellectual property. So what approaches, in your experience, work best in such partnerships? Thank you.
Thank you very much. A very good question. Any takers from our panelists? Perhaps as you think about how to answer that, let me just give a take from our perspective as the DSI as well. So we also negotiate a number of funding instruments, especially in the bilateral level with other African countries, where country X would put in funding for research and would do the same, and we'd expect researchers to get together, come up with a concept or a proposal that we can then co-fund. And the issues of IP become crucial, especially when a partner country or a university in another country does not have an IP policy. With South Africa, it is easy because we have an IP policy. NIPMO is there to guide how we can exploit the IP that is produced from the research. But the clause that we've inserted in all of our agreements is that the IP will be shared, taking into account the foreground IP that has led to the proposal, but also the IP that comes out from the research. So we try to cover your intellectual property in that manner by ensuring that the IP that is generated by both partners or all of the partners is equally shared. I don't know what the take is from the panelists, but it's a key issue. SADC is here, AU is here. We do need a continental and a regional IP policy. Perhaps you can, Annelien and Irene, comment on that from your angle as well.
Yeah, maybe I can come in just to say that we take a similar approach, that within the partnership agreements or memorandums of understanding, I think there has to be a clause on intellectual property, especially if you've got a partnership that's got a number of members or networks who are involved in that partnership. So quite big consortiums that are part of those partnerships. There has to be a clause on intellectual property. But I think what's important is that the IP has to be informed by your own institutional intellectual property policy. So it has to align to your own institutional IP policy. We find in a number of these partnerships across the continent, a number of the organizations, networks, be it universities and that, who are part of these consortiums, the institutions they come from or they represent don't necessarily have the institutional IP policy. And I think there's a lot of awareness and advocacy that needs to be done to ensure that, especially in Africa, that the institutions develop IP policies, be it research institutions which are called RTOs, which is research and technology organizations, or academia, or even organizations such as regional economic communities. There needs to be an institutional IP policy that guides what you negotiate in your agreements. So we do, for example, have a regional IP framework for SADC. We call it a framework where we allow for mutual cooperation amongst the member states. But as part of that framework, we've annexed guidelines. So we've developed guidelines for universities. We've developed guidelines for national governments, for national IP policies. But we've also developed other guidelines, for example, if you're talking about compliance to TRIPS. So we do have those guidelines. So those guidelines are then used by our member states to then go back and develop their own, be it a university policy, IP policy, or even a policy at the national level, which is the IP policy for the country. So we do have the guidelines that we have developed, which member states can use. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you so much, Annelien, and thank you for all our panelists for sharing with us their approaches for partnerships. So with that, I'd like to really thank you for staying the 1 hour with us. Let us give a round of applause for our panelists. Thank you so much, Prof. I think you can come through for the next session. Please do stay on. Prof said the 3 sessions that will run back to back are all interrelated. So please stay on for the next session.
Thank you. Thank you to everybody, and thank you for the opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.